Speaking of Dick Cheney, I
Speaking
think
of
we should
Dick
get to
Cheney,
this one.
speaking of Dick Cheney, as many of you will remember, and actually we had a great email that pointed this out because I talked about Judith Miller last week. She has been really outdoing herself. And I talked about Judith Miller's connection with Ahmed Shalabi, who we just found out last week is actually in play to become the Iraqi prime minister. Ahmed Shalabi was the bank fraudster from Iraq who was under investigation for embezzlement in Jordan, who was a main ally of the neoconservatives in promoting and pumping the war in Iraq. But Judith Miller not only shilled for Ahmed Shalabi in her reporting for the New York Times, she literally had a source by the name of Dick Cheney. So Dick Cheney would go to Judith Miller and he would say, there's no doubt, Judith, that Iraq is pursuing building weapons of mass destruction. And then she would write, there's no doubt that Iraq is building and pursuing weapons of mass destruction. And then Dick Cheney would go on Meet the Press and he would say, there's a report in the New York Times, Judith Miller, weapons of mass destruction. Now, I think we've gotten past the point of expecting that any of these people would quit the public sphere, go on a sincere apology tour, attempt to right their wrongs. Obviously, that's expecting infinitely too much. And I've even just settled into the fact, we were all calling out people who helped bring about this debacle and saying, why are you talking about it? Why should anybody listen to you? I even have just settled in the last week. You know what? Every time I turn on TV, there's going to be someone who helped design this, who helped sell this, who helped manipulate this, and they're going to be on TV with an opinion about Iraq, and that's just how it is. And then Judith Miller on Fox News managed to take things to an even higher level. She's on with her co-panelist, Tammy Bruce, and I believe the host's name is John Scott. And they're talking about how the media, again, with this theme of media irresponsibility, which is like, my brain is broke for an analogy here. Judith Miller talking about media irresponsibility. And she's going to take it one step further. Let's listen to this clip.
There has been Iraq fatigue among the public in this country for a long time. What about the media?
Not the media. Not so, because the media still loves to beat up on who was responsible for the Iraq war and who is to blame for the current controversy, the current crisis. And that is not helpful, John. What we should be doing, what the media should be doing, is encouraging everyone who has a view of what to do now in Iraq to come forward and to discuss it rationally. But they're doing the opposite. They're trying to shut down people like Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, all of the, quote, neoconservatives who brought us this war. It's not helpful.
Even the president, in his news conference yesterday, in that statement before he took a couple of questions, said, one of the lessons we ought to learn from Iraq is don't go invading independent, sovereign countries. That's essentially what he said.
Pause it.
Basically saying...
Pause it. God forbid President Obama, when he says stuff like that, forget the drones and the global covert war. We know what kind of pussy we're talking about here when he says something like that. All right, let's finish.
This isn't my fault.
Well, look, what we're seeing now, and everything in history, we can look back to actions and reactions to everything. At this point, we can blame Iraq on the Hittites if we look further, back enough. At this stage, though, clearly what leadership requires is solutions to what's happening now. But the media, in its arguments, is moving through a partisan base. Whenever you're hearing somebody try to blame one side or another, it's the partisan argument, as opposed to an argument not even necessarily based in solutions for journalists, but based in the facts of the matter of what's transpiring right now. And there's a lot of things clearly that are relating to genocide, chemical weapons, what's happening when it comes to Libya's relationship with Iraq, things that can at least help the American people get a handle on this.
She makes the point that the media ought to be covering what is happening right now, and I've got to say that's right. There's nothing you can do about the past, whether it was right to invade Iraq or wrong. Nothing you can do about it now. The point now is to fix this mess that we've got on our hands.
Exactly, and every president makes mistakes. You can point to George Bush's mistakes. You can point to Barack Obama's mistakes and the withdrawal, the statement that war is receding in the Middle East. Clearly it isn't. That killing bin Laden would go a long way towards solving the problem. It hasn't. What we need to do is have this debate. And if we keep trying to relitigate the past, who's responsible for what, we are not going to get anywhere in
Okay, why doesn't Judith Miller just take the next step and say what she really wants? She should say, you know what I really think we should do is we should just give unlimited media platforms to people like Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz and Bill Kristol. And you know what they could do is they can tell us that if we don't immediately intervene in Iraq, there will be a global catastrophe. And maybe there's chemical weapons stockpiles that this group is compiling right now. And then what could happen is the New York Times could rehire me and I could have secret meetings with Dick Cheney, and then I could write reports, and then he could just go on TV again, and then we could change the Constitution, and George W. Bush could just be given a third term, and Dick Cheney could be vice president again, and we could reinvade Iraq and maybe other countries, because we shouldn't relitigate the past. We should relive all of the stupid, catastrophic blunders of the past, because, John, as you so astutely point out, learning and reflecting on history is obviously the last thing we would ever want to do in foreign policy or presidential politics. I mean, that's just like liberal whining. So I'm going to resubmit my resume to the Times. I expect to be rehired. I expect to have the Iraq brief. And I've also got some ideas cooked up for Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, and really the whole Middle East. I've been going fishing with Dick and Lynn. We can start this all over, and this black guy being president for the last 6 years can just be like a nightmare that never happened. And as a matter of fact, wouldn't you say that Dick Cheney really killed Osama bin Laden? Because I have a senior former administration source that actually told me he was. Cut to Dick Cheney on Meet the Press. Well, the president has received a lot of credit for killing Osama bin Laden. That credit that many would deny that he should receive that credit. Yeah, let's not learn from history. Let's literally just recreate it. Let's let in a swarm of people who have unleashed debacles that our great-great-grandchildren will literally be paying for, not to mention all of the lives lost and limbs blown apart in the desert, and trauma and destroyed infrastructure and lost lives and the connection with a destroyed global economy. Have them all back, never learn from history, recreate it all over again. Thank you, Judith Miller. Can you resign again from something? Except obviously Fox News is exactly where you belong.